In Greek legend, it was Prometheus, in the Bible, a serpent. But in the world's first civilization, Sumer, it was someone far more complex. His name was Enki. To most scholars, he was the god of water, magic, and craft, but hidden beneath the layers of myth, Enki was something more. He gave us divine blueprints of civilization, law, art, justice, sexuality, war, kingship, not taught through sacred sermons, but gifted through forbidden knowledge. And for that, he was erased. His legacy twisted into warnings, his name buried in clay. Because in every age, the one who liberates minds is labeled a threat. What if the first civilization didn't rise because of divine order, but because one entity defied it? What if the origin of society began not with harmony, but with heresy? This is not a myth about creation. This is the suppressed history of how we became human. This is the story of Enki, the Sumerian demon who taught civilization. And once you've heard it, you'll never look at knowledge the same way again. Long before Egypt raised pyramids or Babylon built towers, a different people wrote their legacy in clay. We begin in ancient Sumer, a civilization so old that its memory is often reduced to a footnote in history textbooks. Nestled in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians did something unprecedented. They wrote, not poetry or prayers at first, but ledgers, accounts of grain, trades, and labor. But behind the numbers was a mind, a system, a force that seemed to know how society should be structured. That force, according to Sumerian mythology, was Enki. Unlike the later gods of Olympus or Asgard, Enki was not a conqueror or a sky king. He was a designer, an engineer of reality. He ruled over fresh water, yes, but that was only the surface. Symbolically, he ruled over what flows beneath, the subconscious, the unseen, the source of knowledge itself. In Sumerian texts, Enki isn't just a god. He's a maker of cities, the architect of culture. He designed the fundamental principles that governed life, from kingship to weaving, from legal codes to seduction. These weren't just divine gifts, they were dangerous tools, keys to civilization that humans weren't meant to hold. So why did he give them to us? That's the first mystery. Some texts suggest that Enki did it out of compassion, seeing humanity suffer, confused and voiceless, and deciding to empower them. Others hint at something more radical, a rebellion. A belief that knowledge should not be controlled, that even the lowest being had a right to understand the universe. In either case, Enki crossed a line. He gave mortals what the heavens had hoarded, and in doing so, he sparked the first divine controversy. This wasn't just myth. The Sumerians encoded this belief into their ziggurats, rituals, and tablets, whispers of a world where the boundary between mortal and divine was shattered, not by war, but by ideas. This brings us to a chilling thought. What if civilization didn't evolve through cooperation, but through transgression? What if our very notion of law, order, and society was born not from harmony, but from the defiance of a single being who refused to let knowledge be confined to the gods? That being was Enki, and his story is only just beginning. If power is knowledge, then the gods of Sumer made sure only they held the pen. At the heart of Sumerian cosmology lies one of the most enigmatic relics in myth, the Tablet of Destinies. Not a weapon, not a crown, but something far more powerful, the authority to define existence itself. The tablet was said to control fate, kingship, even the order of nature. Whoever possessed it could decree who would rule, which cities would rise, and what principles would shape the world. In essence, it was the source code of reality, and only the gods were meant to access it. But one god disagreed. Enki, the architect of civilization, believed this knowledge shouldn't be monopolized. He didn't steal the tablet outright. What he did was more subversive. He replicated its power in fragments and dispersed them to humanity. These fragments were called the Me. Each Me was leadership, truth, music, sex, speech, betrayal, fear, warfare, craftsmanship, justice. They weren't moral or immoral, they were functional, tools that could be used wisely or dangerously. Enki gave them freely without a rulebook, as if to say, here, build your world, but be warned, it will reflect who you are. And that's what terrified the gods, because once humans held these forces, they were no longer mere creations. They became creators, and with every passing generation, the divine monopoly on truth weakened. In later myths, the tablet is stolen by a monstrous being, Anzu, a lion-eagle hybrid that plunges the cosmos into chaos. But if you read between the lines, the real theft had already happened, when Enki gave civilization the blueprints for building itself. This is more than mythology. It's a mirror. Modern civilization rests on codes, legal codes, computer code, cultural code, and those who control these codes shape our reality. So ask yourself, who holds the Tablet of Destinies today? Is it governments, corporations, algorithms? The Sumerians left us a warning hidden in myth. When power is centralized, knowledge becomes dangerous, but when knowledge is decentralized, power becomes afraid. Enki's act wasn't just divine rebellion, it was the first decentralization of power in human history. And the consequences, they would echo for millennia. If Enki gave the world its knowledge, she was the one who kept its silence. In every system of balance, light must meet shadow. And in the mythology of ancient Sumer, no figure embodies that shadow more than Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. She is not a villain. She is not evil. She is the counterweight to creation. While Enki carved the blueprint of civilization into the world above, Ereshkigal ruled the world below, the place where names are forgotten, light cannot reach, and truth cannot lie. She was the goddess of finality, of limits, of the moment when all knowledge ends. What's striking about Ereshkigal is not her darkness, but her isolation. Unlike other gods who mingled, battled, and boasted, Ereshkigal was banished, or perhaps abandoned, to the depths of the netherworld. She presides not over punishment, but over permanence. Once you descend to her realm, you don't return unchanged, if at all. Yet in the myth of Inanna's descent, there is a key moment. Inanna, goddess of love, war, and fertility, descends into the underworld to confront Ereshkigal. She is stripped of her power, brought to her knees, and ultimately killed. And who resurrects her? Enki. He sends creatures of clay, neither male nor female, to negotiate with the goddess of death. He does not fight her. He respects her boundary. And in that exchange, we glimpse the deep, cryptic connection between Enki and Ereshkigal. Some scholars suggest they represent dual aspects of the same force. Enki as knowledge revealed, Ereshkigal as knowledge buried. Creation and decomposition, enlightenment and erasure. Together, they form a complete circuit. What one opens, the other contains. Why does this matter? Because any system that only celebrates creation without confronting death becomes reckless. Any culture that chases knowledge without honoring its limits will eventually collapse under its own weight. Enki's rebellion is incomplete without her warning, and perhaps that is why his gift to humanity came with no instructions, because the price of knowing is that you must also learn what should not be known. Ereshkigal is that gatekeeper. All knowledge leads somewhere, but not all places are meant to be reached. In our age of limitless access and endless information, the myth of Ereshkigal is not just relevant, it is vital. Because as we search for what Enki gave us, we must also learn to face what Ereshkigal still guards in the dark. The first revolution wasn't fought with swords or fire, it was fought with knowledge. When Enki gave humankind the me, those mysterious fragments of divine order, he wasn't simply sharing tools, he was shattering boundaries. The me were not symbols of peace, they were volatile, contradictory, even dangerous. They included truth, but also deception, justice, but also aggression, kingship, but also rebellion. He didn't hand humanity a guide to utopia. He gave them the full spectrum of civilization, unfiltered, and the gods were watching. Chief among them was Enlil, Enki's brother and rival. If Enki was the architect, Enlil was the administrator, the enforcer of divine law, the embodiment of authority and order. To Enlil, what Enki had done was more than reckless. It was insubordination, because knowledge in the hands of mortals doesn't just empower them, it makes them unpredictable. It gives them choice. And in the oldest myths of Sumer, when humans begin to act independently, when they become noisy, disobedient, ambitious, the gods respond with brutal clarity. They send plagues, droughts, and finally, the flood. Sound familiar? It should, because this ancient myth predates the story of Noah by over 1,000 years. In the Epic of Atrahasis, the gods decide to wipe out humanity not because they are wicked, but because they are loud, growing, unstoppable. Enlil wants silence, obedience, control. But guess who warns humanity in secret? Enki. He doesn't defy the gods outright. He whispers truth through a dream, subtle, quiet, plausible deniability. He tells a chosen man, Atrahasis, to build a boat. He cheats fate without breaking the law. And once again, Enki steps into the role he always plays, the forbidden teacher, the divine hacker, the one who bends the rules of heaven in favor of human survival. This pattern, knowledge given, power punished, repeats across world myth. Prometheus steals fire, the serpent offers fruit, but Enki, he gives everything and watches as humanity burns under divine backlash. When power feels threatened, it does not argue, it destroys. What makes this story extraordinary is not the flood itself, but the motive behind it. The gods didn't punish humanity for evil. They punished us for progress. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, is that pattern still playing out today? History is not written by the victors, it's written by those who hold the code. For a time, Enki's gifts empowered humanity. The Mi spread through cities like Eridu, Uruk, and Nippur, giving rise to scribes, temples, markets, and kings. But that age didn't last. In the mythic timeline of Sumer, something profound happens. The Tablet of Destinies, once a symbol of divine control and cosmic order, is stolen, but not by a rival god, not by man, by a monster. His name is Anzu, a creature with the body of a lion and the wings of an eagle, a beast of wind and chaos. He doesn't desire power, he desires control of the narrative. When Anzu steals the tablet, the heavens are thrown into panic. Kingship falters, order collapses, even the gods lose their bearings. The myth frames Anzu as a villain, but one has to ask, why would a chaotic beast want the script of creation? Perhaps because the tablet isn't just about fate, it's about authorship. Whoever possesses it decides what reality is. The gods send Ninurta, a warlike deity, to retrieve it. A battle ensues. Anzu is slain, balance is restored. At least, that's what the official version says. But Enki's name? It disappears from the center of the story. After centuries of shaping the cosmos, of guiding mankind in secret, Enki is eclipsed, not demonized, not punished, just erased. Erasure is the cleanest form of censorship. It leaves no scars, just silence. What if the myth of Anzu isn't just about a beast stealing a tablet, but about institutions reasserting control? About a rogue coder who seeded humanity with dangerous knowledge and the system that tried to roll it back? In that interpretation, Anzu may not represent chaos. He represents the fear of a knowledge revolution spiraling beyond containment. He is the backlash. And Enki, he's Prometheus in chains, the serpent cast out. The teacher locked outside the classroom he built. In a world where information moves faster than authority can contain it, this myth echoes with eerie relevance. When the system loses control of the code, it doesn't fix the breach. It buries the programmer. Enki's silence is not his defeat. It is the beginning of the great forgetting, the moment we stopped asking where knowledge came from and started worshiping the structure it left behind. But Somewhere beneath that structure, the code still pulses. What if civilization isn't something we built, but something we were programmed to unlock? The Sumerians believed that Enki distributed the me, divine decrees that made civilization possible. But these weren't commandments. They weren't moral laws. They were something far stranger. Each me was a concept, an archetype, a function, and each one came with no instruction manual. There was a me for truth and one for lying, a me for wisdom and one for fear, a me for victory and another for destruction. Love, hate, prostitution, kingship, architecture, seduction, mourning, all part of the same sacred bundle. Why? Because the Sumerians didn't believe in perfect gods or flawless order. They believed the world was built out of duality. Every gift came with a cost. Every innovation could lead to salvation or collapse. What Enki gave humanity wasn't instructions. He gave us access. He didn't say how to use the me. He simply opened the vault. And once opened, we never closed it again. Fast forward 6,000 years and we're still living in that chaos. We encode the me into legal systems, into algorithms, into cultural narratives and political ideologies. We turn justice into bureaucracy. We turn leadership into propaganda. We weaponize truth and monetize fear. The me weren't tools, they were seeds, and we are the soil. Some scholars now suggest that the me weren't just metaphors. They were early attempts to define the psychological code of humanity. Before Freud, before Jung, before science ever studied the unconscious mind, the Sumerians were already mapping it in myth. Think about it. The me as instincts given names. The me as social behaviors granted divine origin. The me as programmable modules passed down through ritual, story, and symbol. In this view, Enki didn't just give humanity civilization. He gave us ourselves. And here's the most unsettling part. The me never disappeared. They evolve. They live in our software, our media, our religions, and our most personal decisions. What was once carved into clay tablets is now etched in code. Instead of temples, we have platforms. Instead of priests, we have developers. Instead of divine ritual, we have data. And yet the fundamental question remains, do we control the me, or do the me control us? Enki's gift was never about power. It was about choice. But choice without understanding becomes chaos. He was never evil. He was never pure. He was the dangerous middle, the rebel who dared to teach. By now, we understand that Enki's crime wasn't rebellion or betrayal or pride. It was generosity. He gave humankind what no god should give. Agency, not the illusion of freedom, but actual power to shape our destiny. Not rules, but raw materials. Not answers, but the tools to ask dangerous questions. That's why he vanishes from the center of Sumerian theology. Why his stories are fragmented, why in later cultures his qualities are split between heroes and villains. The serpent in the Garden of Eden, he gave knowledge too. Prometheus, who stole fire, he suffered for humanity's gain. Even in modern myths like AI, hackers, whistleblowers, there's always a version of Enki, the one who knows too much and gives too much. We don't burn truth anymore, we marginalize it, we rebrand it as danger. We call it heresy, conspiracy, corruption. In doing so, we repeat the pattern, Pharisees. We elevate the safe gods, gods of order, obedience, and hierarchy. And we cast out the God who asked us to think for ourselves. So, what remains? We remain, the inheritors of the the bearers of unfinished knowledge, the wandering students of a teacher long erased. And if you look closely, you'll see his fingerprints everywhere. In the tension between freedom and control. In every moral gray zone, modern society dares not define. In every moment, a system punishes the mind that dares to ask why. Enki was never meant to be worshipped. He was meant to be followed, quietly, dangerously, defiantly. Because once a gift like that is given, it can't be taken back. It lives in our questions. It lingers in the silence between what we are told and what we sense is missing. And so we ask, what else was buried with him? What other truths were made taboo? And what happens when we start to dig again? This has been the story of Enki, the Sumerian demon who taught civilization. And now the question is yours.